Just so you know, I'm still not home. We've had a tragedy in the family, and that's why I haven't been up on YouTube. I've done a little work on Twitter. Not a whole lot else because of the circumstances. I won't go into the details, but it's been a pretty tough 2 months, and that's about how long I've been here up in Washington State. And I hope you all will forgive me for not commenting on the news and bringing you information as far as my studies and those types of things are concerned. But I definitely had to pay attention to family issues, and I'm going to be up here for still quite some time. Hello, everyone, as you come in. Yeah, this is not my normal time for doing it, but we'll have some things going on probably in the evenings this week. And so I thought I'd better do this now. By the way, YouTube has been somebody has been monkeying around with my YouTube channel. And I tried to get on there today, and they've either changed some things since I was on last, or like I said, they're trying to create some difficulties. And that's okay. Like I've said in the past, I've pretty much said everything I can possibly say. So I'm not really too concerned about that. Yeah, family first, I agree. Okay, well, let me get into the meat of this thing. I don't anticipate this being long. I just wanted to introduce this subject matter so that those who have a questioning mind, those who want to kind of look at things deeper, will have the opportunity to do so. And then we'll probably do a Q&A on this subject and some other things a little later. No, I'm not going to talk about politics today. The world's a mess. I am happy that George Galloway became an MP in Britain. I think it's funny how they say that his election is threatening democracy. And that just proves that their definition for democracy is what they tell you it is, not what it actually is. And that goes for all of our governments, including what the election interference difficulties are happening in the United States by our intelligence community and our political system. If you don't fall into their parameters of subjugation, they call you the enemy, rather than supporting, for instance, in the United States, the constitutional issues of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that people just want to be left alone, limited government, bound by the Constitution about what they can and can't do, and the responsibilities of individuals and states. But that's another subject for another time. If you all are keeping track of all that, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. We're in very dangerous times, our political system. Those who are in the deep state and the intelligence communities, the banks, etc., want to eliminate you. That's just the way it is. First by subjugating you, and then by doing as much as they can to have you disappear. So I'll leave it at that. But this type of deceit and subjugation has basically crossed across all aspects of our lives. History has been altered, even current history. Most people don't know what happened yesterday, much less what happened 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago. All of that's been altered by the powers that be, and historians are aware of a lot of this, but despite the fact that they would like to argue the facts, just like doctors who, and I'm going to talk somewhat between the lines here, doctors or medical people, researchers that talked against the status quo, against the authoritative lines of the last 3 or 4 years, were minimized and even persecuted, prosecuted in some cases. Historians fall into that same thing. Archaeologists, anthropologists, people like that. Those who fund their work also expect certain things to be said by them, and so I don't want to call their scholarship or I don't even want to call into question their integrity. But the fact of the matter is that things are never the way they say they are. And I think most of you know that. And so this is a little introduction. Hopefully I'm 5 by 5. Maybe you all let me know. Like I said, I've had some problems with YouTube today. I went on my computer to get on, and there were all kinds of things they put me through on there. And then when I finally got on, they had changed the format substantially. And they also did it on my phone situation here. I had to jump through some hoops here. So, that's probably, they say they're improving the system, but sometimes I think it's just actually to cause us some consternation. Maybe especially people like me who don't follow the status quo and the traditions. So heads up, that I don't talk traditionally. I'm not out here to necessarily attack any faith or belief or religious system or whatever, but I think there are some things that people at least need to consider, and that's what I'm doing. Thank you for letting me know at 5x5. I appreciate that. And because I have to keep the phone a little further away from me this time, I can't really see the chat too well, so I apologize for that. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get into this. In my book, The Crimson Thread, and if there's a mod on here that can put up that link to the online book, The Crimson Thread. If not, I'll try to remember to put it in the description box later. I talk about how the story of Jesus and the whole idea of salvation and all of that wasn't new in the first century AD. And that the obvious amount of correlating stories or of similar stories. For instance, you have some of the Greek and Roman gods, some of the Sumerian gods, having this idea of birth and relife, of an afterlife and a rebirth, and even a resurrection. Even though these were dealt with in what are normally considered pagan circles by those in power, I'll just put it that way, the sophisticated. My contention was in the Crimson Thread, and still is today, that those earlier renditions of what our purpose is in existence, where we came from, why we're here, and where we go, isn't something that just showed up in the first century AD. And that those ancient cultures, in explaining what they knew about it or what they thought they knew, and I'll give you that, was more of a confirmation of that hope of mankind than a distraction from those earlier religions. Getting ready, folks, takes steady patience. Yeah, no kidding. So, as you can see from the title on this, I think it went up. I hope it did. I wrote down Enki and then a Hebrew word. And this is difficult for a lot of people because there are these types of hints, especially in the Torah. And yes, I know that there were political reasons for the Torah being put together the way it was, and I'm not going to get into all those political or priestcraft and lawyercraft things that went into the Old Testament, particularly the Torah, and even in the prophets and the writings. But there are still things that are obvious that were taken from other places, and people who have argued that many of the stories in the Bible were taken from Sumerian writings, etc. And I will tell you that that's probably true. And then it was made to be just for the people. In other words, just like the language I told you once before, that they moved from the Proto-Hebrew during the Babylonian captivity to the block form Hebrew that they use today, and the ancient form of that before. And it was to give them a national identity and a religious identity. But that a lot of those things were mined from other legends, even other religious systems. Not saying it's false what's there. All I'm saying is that it's not quite what you've been told. And I think I've spent the last many years on the religion series that I've been giving to show you that it's not quite as they say it is. And as a matter of fact, it's substantially different in my estimation. This is spiritual, religious discussion today. If you don't want to do that, and I understand there are people that don't want to, feel free to go. That's okay. It's not going to hurt my feelings. Yeah, I know about the banks and all that. I know what's coming. I know. It's real obvious. We have banks failing all over the place, and other things that are occurring. And they're trying to start up wars to hide their criminality and their malfeasance. But that's for another subject some other time, Walter. So, what did I write down there in the title? Well, I don't have a whiteboard, so we're going to have to use white paper. I hope that's all right. For those of you who don't know, Abraham, according to the story, was from the Ur of the Chaldees, which is a Sumerian city. He was a Sumerian. He was from Sumer. Even in Genesis, it explains that. So he came from Sumer. And there are some stories about the Sumerians as far as, what kind of religion they had and all of that. But I think most of you are aware, of this one aspect of the Sumerian pantheon of gods. And of course, two of those gods that you probably often hear about, these particular Anunnaki characters, are Enki and Enlil. And there are people out there who have been vehemently explaining, and I understand why, because of what I'm going to tell you today, that was the origin of many of the Hebrew stories and even of Jesus himself. I wouldn't quite go that far. First of all, because I don't have any I'm not sure. I'm about 99% positive that Jesus was not a Jew per se, but a Samaritan. And most of you know that I've talked about that, and that the stories were changed, just like many of the other things, for political and military purposes, for power. But by the same token, there are correspondences and correlations in the Hebrew that aren't just similar sounding words because of what they are. And I've talked about that before. And some people would raise a question about what I'm going to present today as being just nothing more than similarities in the languages, not so much an intentional revelation, so to speak. So let's go back to this. This is Exodus 20, verses 2 to 3. And in there, there is something that's very interesting. And for those of you who have a Hebrew Bible, just a Torah translation from Hebrew with the Hebrew there, or just a Hebrew, Greek, English interlinear Bible, however you want to look at it, you'll find this there, okay? Let's review a little bit about who Enki is as one of the Sumerian gods. Enki is the guy who is pretty much, under Sumerian concepts, to have been responsible for the creation of mankind. He's called the Lord of the Earth. You can look all this up on Wikipedia. You don't have to go into a whole, and I know people at Wikipedia, well, you can look online and study some of this out. Lord of the Earth is the deity of wisdom, creation, fertility, things like that. And believe it or not, in Sumerian, Enki doesn't just mean Lord of the Earth. It means I am. Remember my little video on Trey Smith's discussion on the I am and how it was found in Egyptian? And I showed you that. You can go back and look at it if you like. Well, it goes back even further. The Egyptians, especially the Northern Kingdom, as I've explained many times, where Joseph of Egypt and the tribes of Israel, Jacob and all of them, settled was in northern Egypt. Those were actually Hyksos, Hebrews, that they were seeing there. I remember that the ancient alien host talked about Enki. Yes, okay. So the traditions that seem to be different are just specialized for the different cultures that they appear in. In Sumerian times, Enki, Enlil, Anu, those types of things. In Egyptian, Ra, right? Osiris, Set, okay? In Hebrew, in the Israelite culture, which was changed, as I've explained, during the Babylonian captivity, and certainly by 90 AD in Rabbinic Judaism, which is nearly totally different from the way Israel worshipped God prior to the Babylonian captivity. And I've explained all that in my religion series. We have El in the Hebrew concept. We have Elohim. We have YHVH. We have El Elyon. And there are people out there who will say, well, these are different gods. And I've talked about that to some extent too. I've gone into Psalms 82 and Deuteronomy 32, 6 to 9, if you want to know what those are. There were some things that are in there that are somewhat veiled, but they're there if you know where to look. Again, priestcraft, lawyercraft are very similar. And a lot of people will object to me saying that, but it's just a fact of the matter. So if you're trying to convince people that your way is right, you're going to influence the writings that, and the teachings that are given to them so that they fall in line. And that's what's happened here. So in Sumerian, Enki was the I am. Here it is in Hebrew. That's the word in Hebrew, which is on the title above. That's Enki. It's even pronounced pretty much that same way in Hebrew, which leads me to believe that this was a transliteration of the Sumerian name for Enki. They just took it. And where this is, you can look it up in Exodus 20, verse 2. It's where God says, I am the Lord thy God, and thou shalt have no other gods before me. The name is Enki. That's not just the I am. Remember, the I am that is, God is credited as having given to Moses was Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh, right? Which is I am, or I will be, whom I will be. Okay, so the Aleph there is the I. Okay, Ahayeh, Aleph in Hebrew is the I. Okay, so this is the I am that's in Exodus 20, verse 2. Why? Well, it goes back, I think, to something that was going on in Sumer and passed down. Again, Abraham came from Sumer. I think they're telling us, remember, the scribes, some were honest, some were not. And I think this is one of those ones that maybe didn't slip through, but is an indication of some concepts more than anything else that they're trying to explain. Remember, I link in a lot of things to Psalms 82, which talks about the council of the gods, and Deuteronomy 32, 3 to 6, okay? Which talks about the Elohim dividing up the nations, the peoples of the world, under certain lands and the gods of those lands. So I think what we're seeing here is that we're being told that there's, at least in the Hebrew scriptures, that there is indeed a connection to the Sumerian understanding of the plurality of gods and who those gods were. That troubles some people. I've talked about Elohim meaning a plural, meaning a council, sort of like Congress. Congress can be talked about in the singular. Congress did this, Congress did that, but we know that it's a group of people who have been put in there to, run the country, so to speak. Well, Elohim really has that same context, that same idea. Elohim is a council of the gods, more than a single God, supreme entity, consciousness, being, whatever you want to talk about, but that that entity has basically, apparently, had a system of governance that, and of spiritual and physical, actually the entire system, of being those more like us that we deal with. If you try to find the supreme God, okay, that's fine, whatever that is, however you look at it. But the interesting thing is that one of the commandments is to honor your father and your mother. Honor your father and your mother. Jesus didn't talk about YHVH. He never mentioned it. He never even mentioned much of anything else. He mentioned the I am a couple times according to the scriptures, right? He told the Pharisees, before Abraham was, I am, and they wanted to stone him for that. But what is the I am? I just showed you. It's not just in Hebrew, it's in Egyptian, Enki. He called God Father. That's what he said. That's how he addressed God. At least the God that he was representing. He called him my Father, our Father. In fact, that's the way it's written in the New Testament. Now, I have suspicions about the New Testament. But again, some of these things slip through, and the reason why I'm talking about this today is because I think it's another piece of the puzzle that those who have the stomach and the heart for it will be willing to look and examine on their own. Now, back in the 19th century, the late 1800s, early 1900s, what I'm telling you now was being discussed, that this Enki was actually in the Hebrew in Exodus 20, and there were people that were making the connection to Sumer even then, and probably earlier amongst archaeologists and theologians and people like that. But here's the funny part. Because of who funds them in their research, and also especially the Christian and Jewish influence over propaganda, and I'll just put it that way, this entire subject field was basically put to rest. Not because it wasn't true, I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but they didn't put it to rest because it wasn't true. They put it to rest because it went against the prevailing opinions of the day. Much like what happened to the Dead Sea Scrolls in the late 1940s and 50s and even on up into the 90s. They wanted to keep the Dead Sea Scrolls under wraps because it gave another view of the true origins, specifically of Christianity, that the Catholics in particular, but there were also Protestants and even Jews who didn't want that information coming out, show that it wasn't like we've been told for the last 2,000 years, neither in the New Testament nor in the commentaries by the so-called church fathers, early fathers, and commentators and people like that, and certainly in today's world. So we saw it as early as the Dead Sea Scrolls. It took Dr. Robert Eisenman's suit against the Bibliothèque École, the Bibliothèque Nationale, the Israeli Antiquities Authorities, etc., to get those released so that you would have access to them. And anybody who's willing to look at those will realize immediately, under any even minor study of those documents, that we haven't been told the truth even in the New Testament, and certainly not from Paul. Paul did some good things, depending upon how you look at it, but of course I'm very suspicious of him. Enki is the god of this world. Well, that's the way it's looked at, okay? But you got to understand that the material world is not evil, okay? Actually, if you look through the Old Testament, there is no, I just showed you that Enki is mentioned, and this isn't just the I am. Okay, we're being told something here. Somebody wanted to get this through. And as I said, this has been talked about in the past. Enki is not evil. He's responsible, according to everything, to your existence, and is responsible for your resurrection. So people that tell you he's the God of this world, meaning Satan, that's not right. Okay, and it's even in his name, in the Hebrew. Okay, basically this means God's spirit in the hand. So he has control of the souls of men and everything else, as a matter of fact. Now, here's the question. Can you find Enlil anywhere in the Hebrew Torah or even in the Tanakh? That means all the Old Testament. Can you find any reference to Enlil? No. And the reason why is because this God, in Exodus 20, verses 2 and 3, said he's the only one you're going to deal with. There are no others. Not that they don't exist, but that you will give your obeisance and your loyalty to this God. Enlil is not mentioned, and the reason why, again, is because we're not supposed to give him any attention. Not to say he isn't important, but he's just not the God we're supposed to deal with, according to Exodus 20, verse 2. Now, what about all these other mentions of gods in the Old Testament? Baal, Molech, Baphomet, etc. Yeah, but they're not mentioned in the terms of worship. They're mentioned in the terms of that they're a problem. And so it is a little strange that you can't find, since Enki's in there hidden in the story, why can't you find Enlil, who of course wanted to destroy mankind? That should raise some eyebrows. A lot of people point out that the HVH in the word YHVH means destroy. Well, alone it does, or with the particular type of vowels that are used. But that destructive force is found, I think, in something that I've talked about before. It doesn't mention this being under the Sumerian name of Enlil, but it's mentioned under the name in Isaiah for Lucifer. Lucifer does not appear in the Hebrew text, and I think I've told you that before. That was added to avoid confusion with Jesus being the bright star. That name could possibly be, which I've talked about in the past, that name could be a similarity to Enlil, and that's Hillel ben Shekar, which means bright star, son of the morning. And it has two lameds in it. The way, let's see if I can show it to you, the way Enlil does. Let me see if I can show you this. I'll do it down here. So Enlil could very well be what is in goof that up. Okay, I just goofed up my lameds here, but I think you'll get the idea. That's what I get for not having a whiteboard. Enlil, you notice the two L's, right? And there it is. Hillel is there, okay? The similarities are quite astounding, and of course it also goes along with the name of Lilith. You remember, anytime you see a lamed, it means punishment, justice, even destruction, okay? So Enlil probably makes his appearance in the book of Isaiah as Hillel ben Shekar. And under the Sumerian concept of all of this, you have Enlil and Enki both standing by their father, their God, in heaven. And that under the whole concept of the fall of Lucifer, Hillel ben Shekar, one of them leaves the mercy seat. And under that explanation, it looks like that would be Enlil, which I think would correspond with Hillel ben Shekar. And so it's close enough that that's probably how they veiled it, because remember, you're not supposed to worship these other gods, so they didn't want to include Enlil in there. That's my take on it. Let's go to one more thing, because I want to I talked about the Egyptian here a few minutes ago. I want to go to the Ankh. Most of you know what the Ankh is in Egyptian, I think. And this, I didn't draw it very well. This is a hieroglyph of the Ankh. It is, so apparently you're getting the same sound. You understand the importance of phonetics. When you have Enki and the transliteration of the spelling by phonetics goes into Hebrew, it's this, okay? Well, the same thing kind of happens in the Egyptian with the idea of the Ankh. The Ankh, of course, is the symbol of life, air, water. You see how that kind of ties in with Enki? Because I told you he's the Lord of the earth, deity of wisdom, creation, fertility, water, air, everything to do with life. The Egyptian Ankh, here you go again with this phonetic sound equivalence. And there it is right there. So the idea of Enki is even moved over into the Egyptian. Now, of course, they have a whole other pantheon, of course. Osiris, Ra, like I said earlier in the video. But these things pop up if you're paying attention and you're digging deep enough. So I wanted to just present that quickly today. I won't take any more time. I just wanted to throw this out there so that this is kind of, I've been bringing those who follow me on YouTube and on Twitter, X for that matter. I've been using these to bring people along to ask questions, not necessarily to make you change your ideas or even, and I certainly am not trying to make anybody change their faith or whatever. What I'm trying to do is open up some other possible things that you need to examine to more fully understand where these things come from and why it's important to look at the historical, archaeological foundations for these things and how they fit into the time frame of their existence. For instance, I've told you that I don't believe that God told David to move the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh to Jerusalem. I think that was a political move. And the attacks by the Judeans, the Jews, against the northern tribes for worshiping or recognizing these other gods was more of a political move to consolidate power rather than really an intention to give the supreme God the honor he deserves. I don't think that's what it was really about. In the olden days, as I've said, the gods were linked to the ground. You hear it today with the Israelis who are trying to use the Torah to justify their injustices in Israel, I'll just put it that way, saying that God gave it to them, that it's their land for the last 3,500, 4,000 years. Notice gods are tied to the land. I told you also that the constellations in the sky are actually designed to be points on the ground. That's really what it's about. So those gods have places on the earth that are considered theirs. It talks about it in Deuteronomy 32. Told you about that before. And it's also alluded to in Psalms 82. So again, I wanted to throw this out to you so that you'd realize that there's some other things going on here. Maybe the Sumerians weren't that far off. You know, if you want to defeat somebody, if you want to overcome them, if you want to subjugate them, if you want to minimize them, you tell a story that defames them, that makes them look like something other than they are. And therefore, about the only thing that you can do is search your heart and your mind and something a little more tangible, the archaeological record. And that's why I brought up Dr. Adler's book, Jonathan Adler's book, The Origins of Judaism, and showed it to you, and I brought that to your attention here just a little while ago. And he begins by making, a statement of his support for Judaism. But then he goes through and scholastically, professionally, scholarly, shows that Judaism as it exists today did not exist prior to the Babylonian captivity. And I would go so far as to say that it didn't really exist until the Council of Yavna, which basically was the foundation for rabbinic Talmudic Judaism and later rabbinic Talmudic Kabbalistic Judaism. So there we are. I've given you some basic information, and there are people that, of course, will say, no, that's not what that is. Remember, this was discussed by scholars, archaeologists, and other people in the late 19th and early 20th century. And it only went away for the same reason why people that were involved in the Dead Sea Scrolls tried to keep the Dead Sea Scrolls under wraps, because it goes against the traditional views of powerful institutions, ecclesiastical, political, and today even corporate. Yeah, 72 Names of God, yeah, I know. I've actually got that book. Somebody was asking about it here. Let me see if I can find it here. The book, oh, it's Walter, yeah, it's 72 Names of God, yeah. Did I tell you about that, Walter? Maybe I'm the one that put you onto that. Yeah, by Huda Berg. You got to be careful with Berg, though. Okay, he gives you a lot of good information, but I refer to these other books and things not so much to tell you to depend on them hook, line, and sinker, but just to let you know that these other ideas, these other understandings are out there, and that you really need to look at them. If you want to be honest with yourself, there are those who will say, "No, I'm not looking at that. God's talked to me. I know exactly what the truth is. It's either Allah or it's Jesus Christ or whatever they fall in line with, but then they ignore other things because it's convenient. It's easier that way. It's not an easy trail to follow, and it's not always comforting. But I would rather be uncomfortable in the truth than comfortable in a lie. Okay, that's how I look at it. All right. I've given you, sorry I didn't have a whiteboard and I kind of goofed up on a halal here. I actually put L's down. Whoops, I meant to put down lamans. Let me write that again so you can see it a little bit better. This is what it should have looked like, and I goofed it. Yeah, it'll be like this. Okay, right there. Not like that so much, but more like that. All right, that's all I've got for you today. Something for you to go look at. Yeah, go to Wikipedia, do an online search, look at these things on your own. Come up with your own conclusions if you like, of course. But just don't shut the door on other possibilities. Those ancient cultures weren't as degenerate and as backwards as the current power structures would have you believe. If you go out and you find a stream in the mountains, it's usually the most pure at its source, and it becomes more, for lack of a better term, contaminated as it goes downstream. Okay? Our history is the same way. The truth is probably closer to our early ancestors than what we have today. That's all I got. I'm not sure when I'll be back up. I wanted to get this today. First of all, I wanted to check and make sure I could still use this on my phone because, like I said, YouTube has made some adjustments and also threw up some stuff on my account that I was going, where the heck did this come from? And so I went on my computer to try to fix it, and it was a mess. So I wanted to make sure that at least this tool was still up and running. Who knows how much longer I'll be able to do this? And I guess the other question is do I want to continue to do it? Especially when now I'm bringing out things like this, which are going to cause all kinds of grief. I can hear the rabbis screaming right now and pulling their hair out, what hair they've got left. And even some of the Christian scholars, they're not going to like this. I'm just telling you what's in the Hebrew. That's all I'm telling you. And that it fits the Sumerian concept of the Enki. As a matter of fact, you even say this word in the Hebrew. You can look it up in Strong's if you want. You even pronounce it Enki, basically. Anki, which is the same thing. All right. Well, have at it, ladies and gentlemen. God is there. He's here. We're a part of that being. We're a part of it, just like we're part of the sun. You know, I think I told you some time ago that the sun isn't something that's out there. You know, the sun in the sky. It's not something that's out there. We're actually inside a portion of the sun. We're actually inside the sun. That's kind of an important thing to understand. It's not really separate from us. It's not out there. It's actually, we're in it. We're in a lower energy field of it, but we're in the sun. And the same thing with God. God isn't just out there. He's here. He's in us. We are a part of Him. And yeah, I call it a him. I call God a him. Yeah, there's a reason why I do that. And I think I've explained that before too. But it's interesting that Jesus called his God Father. He was identifying something there very important. And that's been my experience as well. And I think I've talked about it before, and I'm not bragging, I'm just saying this was my experience. I had a very defining moment at one point in time. I've talked about it to some extent in the past. And God didn't say, I am Jesus Christ. Being the king, he didn't say I'm Jesus. Oh, well, you're being deceived. Really? Well, maybe you're being deceived. Because that wasn't his name, as I've often explained. That was his calling. That was his messianic title. No, what I was told, and I think I've said it before, and this, again, I'm not patting myself on the back, I'm not bragging, I'm just saying some things here we have to consider. Jesus called him Father. He didn't call him YHVH. He didn't call him any number of other names. He called him Father. And when this thing happened to me, that's what I was made to understand, is that he is my Father, and that's how it came across. There's something about this father relationship that takes precedence over all these other things. And as Psalms 82 suggests, and Deuteronomy 32, 3-6, maybe there are other fathers out there that everybody has that are different, and that we owe a family allegiance, that comes, the understanding of that comes pretty definitively down to us. Honor thy father and thy mother might have more to do, even with our spiritual connections, than it does with the physical. Keep your eyes on the horizon, your ears to the ground, situational awareness on high. Pray, stay out of the way. You know, take part, try to make a difference, but don't go seeking trouble. If it comes to you, defend yourselves, but and your neighbors and your friends. But man, it's getting so you can't trust anybody. I mean, literally, you can't trust anybody. I could tell you some stories here lately, but I won't. All right, with that, I'm going to go. It's been 45 minutes. Not sure when I'll be up next time, but next time we'll probably get into, I'll take some questions about this that I wasn't able to do today. I'm not sure when that will be. I'm not sure what YouTube is going to do to me here in the next little while. But we'll try to have a Q&A on this subject matter. All right? Study this stuff out for yourselves, okay? Matter of fact, you can go to my religion series and go through that whole thing. I think that's it. See you next time.